This is a popular episode, and it makes me wonder why they never did a sequel to it. They could have done one called Charlie's Ex, where they meet Charlie's former girlfriend who has the same powers that he has. Or they could have done one called Charlie Hex, where he comes to Captain Kirk for help after getting cursed by a coven of space witches. Or they could have done one called Charlie's Checks, where he gets in trouble for trying to pay for stuff with phony bank drafts and triggers a galactic financial crisis that leads to the Federation doing away with money altogether. Or they could have done one called Charlie Flex, where he becomes a bodybuilder. Or they could have done one called Charlie Tex, where this is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode Charlie X. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know what would happen if Anthony from It's a Good Life on the Twilight Zone got picked up by a spaceship, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. What if an incel had superpowers? I bet it wouldn't be good. Let's find out. The Enterprise rendezvous with a cargo ship, the Antares, and the captain and the first officer beam over along with a guest, a teenage boy named Charlie Evans, who they discovered living all alone on the planet Thesis, the lone survivor of a ship that crashed there 14 years ago. The Enterprise is going to transport Charlie to a colony where his closest remaining family lives, and Charlie seems excited to go, and the crew of the Antares seem excited to see him go. The captain is like, well, he's all yours now, Captain Kirk, gotta go. Don't you need supplies? Food? Booze? Some porno for your crew? I know what perverts you container ship sailors are. Nope, we're good. Have fun with Charlie. Think happy thoughts. Gotta go. Bye. The captain and the first officer of the Antares beam out, leaving Charlie on the Enterprise. Yeoman Rand shows up to escort Charlie to his quarters, and Charlie is instantly smitten. He takes one look at Rand, then turns to Kirk and says, "Is that a girl?" And Rand is like, "That? Oh, great, this is all I need, some creepy dude trying to push his dick in my face. This had better not become a pattern." Dr. McCoy examines Charlie and is amazed to find him so healthy and intelligent, despite having grown up all by himself on an uninhabited planet. Charlie claims he educated himself using the memory banks of the crashed ship, and that after the ship's food supplies ran out, he just found things to eat out in nature. After Charlie leaves sickbay, he sees a couple of guys agreeing to meet up later in the rec room, and one guy gives the other guy a manly bro swat on the ass. Charlie takes note. When Yeoman Rand walks by, Charlie runs up and presents her with a gift, a bottle of her favorite perfume, which Charlie has somehow suddenly acquired. Rand is flattered, but she's working and can't talk now. She tells Charlie to meet her later in the rec room, and Charlie's like, okay, and he gives her a manly bro swat on the ass. Rand does not like that at all and tells a confused Charlie to ask Captain Kirk to explain why he can't go around booty-slapping girls. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are wondering how Charlie could have possibly survived alone on Thesis all these years. Spock isn't buying the learned to talk from record tapes and survived by eating wild fruits and vegetables story. He thinks the Thesians, the former inhabitants of the planet, who have been rumored to still exist in some form, must have had something to do with it. Kirk's like, whatever the reason he survived, he's here with us now. And McCoy's like, and he's going to need a father figure. Not it. Later, a bunch of the crew are hanging out in the rec room. Spock's there playing his Vulcan auto harp, and Uhura is singing a song about how he's a devil and all the women on the ship should watch out. This sounds like an HR nightmare on multiple levels. But then Charlie walks in and sits down next to Yeoman Rand and tries to get her interested in a card trick, but like all sensible people confronted by someone trying to show them a card trick, she ignores him. Uhura sings a song about Charlie and how he's got a crush on Rand, and Charlie gets embarrassed and stares at Uhura really hard, and she suddenly loses her voice. That's weird. What a strange thing to happen for no reason. Anyway, Charlie shows Rand a card trick where he takes 3 cards, turns them over, and magically changes them into promo shots of Rand. Then he vanishes an ace and makes it reappear in her bra. Neat tricks, assuming the person doing them doesn't have superpowers. Later, Charlie catches up to Kirk in the hallway and asks how come he can't smack girls on the ass whenever he wants. And Kirk goes, well, you see, Charlie, horsing around with the fellows is one thing, but girls don't like it when desperate, sweaty losers lay hands on them. Hope this helps. Kirk is paged to the bridge and Charlie follows. The Antares, the ship that dropped off Charlie on the Enterprise, is sending out a call. The captain says he needs to warn Kirk about something. Then the signal is lost, and a minute later Spock detects debris at the position of the Antares. Charlie's like, "It wasn't a very well-constructed ship. Something like this was bound to happen. It wasn't me, if that's what you're thinking. Gotta go." Charlie plays chess with Spock and loses and retaliates by mentally melting the white chess pieces after Spock leaves. Oh my God, Charlie does have superpowers. That's how he did those card tricks. That is cheating, Charlie. It's not really magic if you're really magic. Charlie runs into Rand in the hallway again, blows off her friend Tina, and expresses his love and desire for Rand in his clumsy, pushy, inarticulate teenage way, and she, quite rightly, is like, ew, and goes straight to Captain Kirk and says, "Hey, you've got to tell this lovesick walking hard-on to leave me alone, or I'm going to crush his nuts, and not in the way he wants me to." Kirk calls Charlie to his quarters for a private meeting. First, he's like, "Do you know who took a blowtorch to these chess pieces?" Charlie's like, "No." So then Kirk says, "Look, you're a teenager. You're a mess. We're all a mess when we're teenagers. You'll get through it. Just try not to be such a shithead and stop trying to make something happen with Yeoman Rand, because, kid, she's not that into you." "But what else am I supposed to do? I gave her gifts. I showed her card tricks. I was mean to her friends. I hit her. I vomited my feelings all over her in a fumbling, embarrassing, and totally unsolicited way. It's like I can't do anything right." "Charlie, there are a million things in this world you can have and a million things that you can't. That's not a pleasant fact, but that's the way it is. So you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life. Now come on, let's go get some exercise. You'll feel better." The workout does not go well. Kirk tries to teach Charlie how to safely take a back bump and how to do a couple of judo throws, but Sam, another guy there working out, laughs at Charlie after Kirk takes him down, and Charlie responds by wishing Sam into the cornfield. Kirk's like, "Where did he go?" And Charlie says, "That's what he gets for laughing at me." Kirk calls in security, but Charlie knocks them down using the power of telekinesis and makes their sidearms disappear. Kirk sternly orders Charlie to go to his quarters, and Charlie resists at first, but eventually agrees. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy have a meeting about Charlie. Spock mentions that there are legends about Thesians having powers similar to those Charlie has exhibited. Kirk declares that they can't possibly drop him off at the colony now. With his powers and his destructive adolescent impulses, he'd wreck the place and kill everybody there. Just then, Charlie walks in. Kirk says, "Charlie, did you blow up the Antares earlier?" And Charlie says, "Yeah, but they were mean to me, so to hell with them." Kirk says, "What about us? Are you going to blow us up?" And Charlie goes, "Maybe," and walks out again. Charlie shorts out the communication circuits to stop the Enterprise from contacting the colony. Then he takes out the navigation console to stop Kirk from changing course. Kirk asks Spock for a sensor reading to figure out what's going on, but Charlie puts a whammy on Spock, and Spock's like, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack burned off his fucking dick." "Spock, are you all right?" "I'm sorry, Captain. Little Bo Peep fucked a sheep, blew a horse, licked his feet, she ate his ass so very nice, tongued his balls not once but twice." "Mr. Spock, I need those sensor readings." "Good old Mother Goose, remember her? I fucked her." Kirk tells Charlie to knock it off and get lost, and again, Charlie obeys. But as he stalks down the hallway, he runs into Rand's friend Tina again and transforms her into an iguana. Well, I'm sure she'll be fine. Charlie walks into Rand's quarters and finds her in her nightgown. He presents her with a pink rose. Rand says, "Do you knock?" As she argues with Charlie, she secretly turns on her communicator so that Captain Kirk on the bridge can hear what's going on. Rand tells Charlie to take a hike, but Charlie doesn't take no for an answer. Kirk and Spock show up. Charlie knocks them down with his psychic powers, and Rand hauls off and smacks him. So, Charlie wishes her into the cornfield. "She made me do it. I loved her, but she wasn't nice to me. She was a mean, nasty woman." Charlie warns Kirk that he could do the same to him too, but he needs Kirk to run the ship, because unlike the Antares, the Enterprise is too big and complicated for Charlie to operate all by himself. Kirk's like, "Thanks for telling me your weakness, Chuck." "What?" "Nothing." They try to confine Charlie behind a force field, but that doesn't work. He just makes the entire wall disappear. Then, just for shits and giggles, he makes a young lady into an old lady. Then he passes some people laughing and retaliates by making one of their faces disappear. Kirk tells Spock and McCoy about his plan. It takes concentration for Charlie to control the ship, so maybe, if they gave him more things to worry about, his grip will loosen, and while he's distracted, somebody could sneak up behind him and take a lamp or a bottle or something and end this. Charlie comes back to the bridge, sits down in Kirk's chair. Kirk says, "Get out of my chair, you'll get your teenage pimple grease all over it." Then Spock and McCoy start flipping switches on all the bridge consoles, which really bugs Charlie for some reason. Kirk throws Charlie out of the chair, and Charlie attacks him, but the distraction works. The ship's controls are free now, and there's a message coming in from an approaching ship, a ship that says it's from Thesis, the planet Charlie was rescued from. Suddenly, Yeoman Rand reappears. Then, a big green floating head fades in and says, "Hi, I'm a Thesian. We're usually invisible, but I'm taking this form so I can have a quick chat with you. Charlie crashed on our planet, and we gave him our superpowers so that he could survive, but clearly that was a mistake. We brought back everyone he disappeared and fixed everyone he changed, except for that ship he blew up. Nothing we can do about that. Sorry. Anyway, we'll take him now." Seeing how disturbed Charlie is at the thought of returning to live with the Thesians, Kirk says to the big green floating head, "Can't we work something out? He should be with his own people. Could we, teach him not to use his powers?" The big green floating head is like, "Nope, he'll never stop using his powers. Eventually, he'll kill you or you'll have to kill him. That's the way it is." Charlie begs Kirk to let him stay. "Please don't let them take me. You said you were my friends when I came on board before I killed all those people and mutilated a few others and made a few others disappear and commandeered the ship and threatened everyone. What happened to our beautiful friendship? Don't make me live with the big green floating head. He doesn't love. He doesn't feel. He's not my real dad." Charlie fades away. Uhura confirms that he's aboard the Thesian ship. Kirk's like, "Well, what a bummer this whole experience was. Thank God that's over." And it is over. The end. This was the second episode of Star Trek ever broadcast, and it does an excellent job of establishing the tonal range that the series would remain within for most of its run. It's got its playful parts, its goofy parts, but the underlying situation is taken pretty seriously, and the ending is surprisingly emotional and played absolutely straight. If you're looking for a representative sample of Star Trek, the original series, a condensation of what it's like, Charlie X will do just fine. It will also do just fine if you're looking for a good episode. It has its problems. The plot isn't much to speak of, ramping up gradually to the villain of the week taking over the ship, which will soon enough become one of the show's most overused tropes. Kirk's plan to defeat Charlie by distracting him would play better if it involved something more concrete than just having Spock and McCoy start pushing buttons. And the ending is a big green floating head ex machina, but for me, the positives of Charlie X outweigh the negatives. And the biggest positive of all is Charlie himself. Charlie is not a nice young man. He's petulant and vindictive and thin-skinned and callous and selfish. In other words, he's a teenager. Not that I'm saying all teenagers are like that, but enough of them are, enough of us were, that the description rings true. Charlie is a bad person, but he's also a good character. What makes Charlie a good character, aside from Robert Walker's performance, which is excellent, is that he has layers. Charlie does harmful, inexcusable things, and the episode does not ask us to excuse him, but it does ask us ultimately to understand him and to sympathize with him. Because of his youth, his inexperience, his ignorance, as well as his tragic and extraordinary childhood, Kirk and the others never treat Charlie as evil, even after they find out about his powers and all the terrible things he's done. He's a threat. His actions can't be tolerated or condoned, but he's also a teenager reaching out and lashing out from a place of unfathomable loneliness. Many of us felt misunderstood or isolated when we were Charlie's age. We felt like we were the only ones like us on the entire planet. Charlie actually was the only one like him on his entire planet. And he lived that way for 14 years. The concept of Charlie, what if a teenager had godlike powers, is solid enough to carry most of the episode all by itself, and it does. The gradual reveal of Charlie's powers is well done. We get right away that there's something different about him. We see how eager the crew of the Antares is to drop him off on the Enterprise and get away. We see how he reacts to Captain Kirk and to Yeoman Rand. We see his perfume bottle from out of nowhere and his impossible card tricks. There's the mysterious destruction of the Antares and a line from a member of the ship's galley staff about synthetic meatloaf magically transforming into turkey, but we don't see definitively that he has telekinetic powers until he melts the chess pieces, although by that point we've been given enough clues that it's not really a surprise. Once Charlie's abilities are out in the open, there's a real tension in the episode. If you were stuck on a spaceship with a moody, horny, poorly socialized teenager with a head full of infinity stones, what would you do? Charlie's unpredictable, destructive behavior isn't just a product of his adolescent hormones. The episode makes it clear that Charlie's behavior problems are the result of his upbringing. Charlie is a product of neglect. For most of the episode, Captain Kirk and the others assume Charlie grew up alone on the planet where he was found by the Antares. In the end, it turns out Charlie wasn't alone, but he might as well have been, since the disembodied Thesians who gave him his powers and looked after him weren't much to write home about his parents. Either way, because of his difficult childhood, Kirk and the rest of the Enterprise crew show Charlie a degree of patience and compassion that they probably wouldn't show most other people who have done the things Charlie has done. Even Yeoman Rand, the object of Charlie's most frequent and most uncomfortable attentions, tries her best to be kind to Charlie, to let him down easy, right up until he lets himself into her room and tries to force himself on her. Speaking of Rand, this episode is either the first or second time we see her become a target of sexual harassment and abuse. It depends on whether you go by the production order or the original air dates. The Enemy Within was produced before Charlie X, but broadcast after, and in that episode, the evil version of Captain Kirk also menaces and forces himself on Rand. However you order the episodes, it's a shame that so much of Rand's relatively brief time on the series is taken up by her getting mauled by sexually aggressive men. At least in Charlie X, she gets to stand up for herself, and her complaints about Charlie to Kirk are mostly taken seriously instead of being turned into a joke at the end by Spock, of all people. By presenting Charlie as a threat, but also showing us why he acts the way he does, a combination of typical teenage volatility and an emotionally deprived childhood, the episode creates enough space for the other characters, and for us in the audience, to feel some sympathy for Charlie. What he does is not okay. His terrible upbringing doesn't excuse his transgressions, but that conclusion still lands because, even though we don't condone, we can understand. In the end, all Charlie wants is to be accepted, to be included, to be loved. Even after everything Charlie has done, all the harm he's caused, Captain Kirk acts with compassion and asks the big green floating head if there's any way Charlie can stay. But there isn't. So, there is Charlie, standing all by himself on the bridge, alone, as he's been for as long as he can remember, begging to be allowed to stay on the Enterprise. They can't feel. They don't love. Please, I want to stay. And then he's gone. And the only thing Kirk can say is, it's all right. It's all over now. It's a grim gut punch of an ending, and it works because by the time we get there, we see Charlie as a human being. A dangerous, violent, destructive human being, but a human being who is only 17 years old and who has been abandoned or failed by everyone who should have been teaching him and watching out for him all this time. Charlie X is written by arguably the most consequential writer in the history of Star Trek, D.C. Fontana, from a story by Gene Roddenberry and directed by Lawrence Dobkin, who, fun fact, 25 years later guest starred in the Star Trek TNG episode The Mind's Eye, where he plays Kel, the Klingon who orders the brainwashed Geordi to carry out an assassination. He should have just swung over to Thesis and picked up Charlie. I bet Charlie would have killed somebody. No brainwashing needed. See, Kel was conspiring with the Romulans, and the Romulans make everything way too complicated, you know? Anyway, Charlie Evans is the first orphan of many orphans we meet in the Star Trek franchise. He's one of the most threatening, but also one of the most sympathetic, and definitely one of the most memorable. And hopefully, he's also a lesson to all the parents or would-be parents in the audience. What a person needs more than anything else while they're growing up is love and guidance and understanding and support from the people around them. If Charlie had gotten that from the big green floating head, maybe that lady wouldn't have lost her face. And also all those people on the Antares wouldn't have died, but whatever, that happened off screen, so who cares? Those are my thoughts on Charlie X. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this batch of reviews of episodes about Orphans continues. We'll jump ahead to Star Trek: The Next Generation for an episode from that show's 3rd season titled The Bonding. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.